Folks, we're studying Chassidus. We're learning Chassidus, and it's quite beautiful when you learn Chassidus and you experience the depth of Torah. We learned yesterday a law in Torah about interest, and it became the most interesting insight into human suffering.
Especially throwing the rocks down.
Yeah. So that's what Chassidus does. It opens our eyes to the deeper layers of what lies beneath the surface.
I did it with a friend last night. I told him about the Parsha, and I told him about he was like blown away.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm so happy. Yeah, it's beautiful when you share the teachings of Torah with other people. I'm reminded, Marty of a story of the Rebbe Maharash, who was talking to one of his Chassidim in a private audience. Rabbi Vigler was a Chassid of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe. And actually, the Rebbe Maharash, we have no picture of him, but they say that he looked exactly like his grandson, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe. So he looked something like this. In this private audience, the Rebbe Maharash said to the Chassid, who was an average Chassid in terms of his, intellectual capacity and so on. He said, "I'm envious of you, Rebellia." What would the Rebbe say to a Chassid? "I'm envious of you." So he says, because you're a businessman, you go out to the marketplace and you meet other Jews. And when you do that, you encounter them in conversation. And when you engage them in conversation, you inevitably share with them a word of Torah. Something that you've recently learned, a medrash, something that you recently learned. And when you do that, said the Rebbe Maharash to the Chassid, the angels rejoice on high. It is the greatest trade in the marketplace. So I'm envious of you. So I got to say to you, Marty, that if you're sharing Torah study over dinner last night, the teachings that was actually a teaching from the Rebbe, how beautiful it is, and that you should know that in heaven they're rejoicing in your entrepreneurship.
Finally.
You're not so much.
So back to Chassidus, folks. Back to Chassidus. Chassidus, we're on this journey. We're trying to set the record straight on our mission in this world. And, we're learning the discourse based on the verse in Psalms 104, which says, man goes out to his labor and his work until evening. Make sure you finish your work until evening. We established the principle that we're in this life, on this world, on a mission. And therefore, we need to make sure we finish that mission before we die. If you don't, then you have to reincarnate. You have to come back to live another life in this world. You have to come back and live another life in another taxi, in another body, which is another physical body, reincarnation, and you have to finish that mission, right? That's what we say, try to finish it the first time around instead of having to schlep back. It's not so easy for a soul to keep on coming back. It's quite painful, it's quite confusing, it's difficult. Interestingly, at birth, we rejoice, and at death, we mourn. When the Kabbalah said it should be the other way around. At birth, you should express anxiety. How will this soul fare the tempestuous waters? Is that the word? Yes. Tempestuous waters of this life. Will the soul succumb or prevail? And at death, when the soul is, accomplished and achieved so much, nice to rejoice. Let's get home, right? It's interesting. So with that perception in mind, we're like, okay, so we get in the memo now. It's about time, 50, 60, 70, 80 years into the game to get the memo. But at least now, better late than never, right? To get the memo that we're on a mission, right? We get in the memo and we're learning what that memo is. The question is, how do you implement it? And that's the final leg here, the final segment of how to implement the mission. What are you going to do about it? Okay, so now that I know about it, in my head, how am I going to implement something in practice?
Doesn't he makes that clear, doesn't he?
Tell me how.
Well, study the Torah, do mitzvahs. Isn't that?
Yeah, but how are you going to suddenly become a Torah scholar and a mitzvah observer? Like what's going to how's it between today and tomorrow? How's that going to change? How do you change?
One step at a time.
So
first of all, it has to be on the agenda to do so.
The agenda.
Your mission.
Your personal agenda.
First, you need to know where you're going if you're ever going to get there, right? So it's got to be on your radar, right? Then it's got to be on your agenda. You're like, okay, the fact that we're having this conversation is already putting it on the agenda, right?
And being around other people who do study.
Oh, surround yourself. These are all very good tips. Surround yourself with a
Geniality.
society of people that are like-minded. You know, the modern psychologists today, they say that you are the aggregate of the 5 people that you associate with most frequently. Think about that. Think about that, folks. If you hang around with rotten individuals, if your associates are people that are, you know, self-deprecating, if they're nasty.
Deprecating others.
No, self-deprecating is not okay.
Not okay.
Self-deprecating is okay.
Why no, it's not okay. Why is self-deprecating okay?
Why was it putting yourself?
Well, humility.
Self-deprecating is the core of all problems.
I think that if you're,
Taking humility.
it adds to humility.
Modesty.
Why would we don't have that to be grandiose?
Depends
in
what you
our
think.
approach?
Humility is nothing to
aspects
do
of
with
self?
self-deprecating.
What aspects of self you're deprecating?
Putting yourself down.
Right, they're 2 different things.
Self-deprecating.
Humility means humility is the ability to recognize your weaknesses, but also to recognize your strengths. So know your place. Self-deprecating means I'm nothing.
Oh, no.
I'm not worthy.
That's not what we mean by
No, that's not-
But I think I think it's a common misconception what you're talking about. There's a difference between shiflus and anava in Hebrew. Shiflus and anava. Shiflus means to look down on yourself. Humble means
You don't promote yourself.
no. Humble means like this. Well, let me give an example of humble. Give an example of humble. It says like this. It says that Moses, Va'ish Moshe Anav Mikala Adam Asher Al Pnei Adam, and Moses, the man Moses, was the most humble man to ever walk the face of this earth. That's a direct quote from the Bible, the 5th book of Moses. Right? Now, it says that Moses was the most humble man to walk the face of this earth. How does that even make sense? How is that even possible? How could Moses have not known who Moses was? He was either
Well, he said to
Well,
God,
you
he's
can,
not,
you can, you can,
wanting
you
me.
can know you're great and still be humble about it.
how's that possible? How can you know that you're great and
You
still be
don't-
humble?
You don't promote yourself. You don't proclaim your greatness.
So you mean step out of the limelight?
Well, you don't. If
Well,
you're
but Moses didn't
great,
step
you don't
out
have
of
to
the
tell the
limelight.
world that you're great.
So
People know
you're not
great.
into the selfie generation. Look what I'm eating for breakfast today. Look where I am,
Take
right?
pictures of every food.
Self-promoting.
So he
I'm
tells
own
Hashem,
paparazzi.
right,
What?
so he
Right.
tells Hashem he's not worthy. He's not the
Moses.
guy, right? Moses tells Hashem
He actually tells
that-
Hashem he's
so
not the
that is
guy.
actually that's self-deprecating.
You
I would agree with
That
that.
is
And you,
self-deprecating.
yeah, and you compare yourself.
I
to
would
your
agree
greatest
with that.
possible
What's
self.
that?
So Moses tells God at the burning bush, I'm not your guy. Took him 7 days to negotiate with God until he finally acquiesced to the mission.
Bonus.
But
I don't, as Stephen suggested, compare myself to other people, but you compare yourself to your greatest possible self.
that's right. That's a very beautiful way to put it. Compare yourself to your greatest possible self. Let's develop this theme a little bit, the beautiful theme here. So Moses, on the one hand, had elements of self-deprecating, but at the same time, it says Moses was the most humble person on the face of the earth. Let's talk about this. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you got a book named after you, if the most popular book in the history of the world is named after you, you're someone special. All right? Imagine there was the book of Rob Berger, right?
After the fact.
I mean, you'd be like,
Posthumously?
well, you know? Imagine the most published book in the face of the earth is called The 5 Books of Moses. You know, that's pretty. How could he be humble?
But that was after the fair.
Oh, it happened after the fact.
Well, look at some of our greatest artists.
Van Gogh.
They
Van Gogh
start-
couldn't
they couldn't
put 2 pennies together.
Have enough money for a meal. so
Okay,
they
so let me ask this
died.
question: do you think Moses knew that he
The
split
conduit.
open the Red Sea? Do you think he like registered that part?
No, he was God's servant.
He was just a conduit.
Do you think that Moses recognized that he was the one who spoke truth to power, brought the corrupt Egyptian pagans to their knees?
No, I don't.
He was
The
not
conduit.
more than God's tool.
It wasn't
This-
his idea to do what he did, so he knows it's.
So you're all beautiful comments here. The definition of humility is to recognize. Oh, so Terry says no. Terry says he didn't recognize. Well, if Moses for sure subscribed to the Sinai Times, for sure, he saw his face front page above the fold every single day. Come on,
On the papyrus.
right? If Trump could get that kind of coverage, Moses got more coverage than Trump. Must be, right?
Unbelievable.
right?
More than drunk.
Even his father-in-law
What?
came up and said, "You're not doing this right."
Yeah.
It's father-in-law first. Then I heard.
What was that, Andy?
Well, that's what every
Andy, what'd you
father-in-law
say?
does,
His
though.
father-in-law said.
But yeah,
Every
isn't it
father-in-law
pretty
says
interesting?
you're
Isn't
not
that cool? Isn't that cool? Moses' father-in-law shows up. Last week's Torah portion, Moses' father-in-law shows up, Jethro, and he says, "You're doing it wrong."
Yeah,
You
well,
need,
every
you need to
father-in-law.
get this.
Wow.
you need to
Well,
get-
I mean, seriously,
heard everything
That's the
happened.
first thing he says. I don't know whatever you're doing, but you're doing it wrong. Let me show you how to do it. Anyway, yeah, let me just develop this thing here. So Moses understood the following. Of course, Moses knew who Moses was. Of course, he knew. He knew that he was the man. Of course, he knew. He wasn't foolish. But Moses knew like this. He knew that everything that he had achieved as the messenger of God because of the powers endowed within him by God Almighty as a gift.
That's self-deprecation.
No, that's not self-deprecation.
No, it's not.
That's not self. That's not self-deprecation. Let me just finish the point.
Realized it was given to him.
Oh, he realized that it was given to him, and that's what he says to God at the burning bush. He says to God, "Don't you think you could choose someone else to give these gifts to?" Moses truly felt that had God given the gifts of Moses to another person, that other person would have done a far better job than Moses did at being Moses. So Moses knew who Moses was. He just didn't take the credit for it. Because he says if God would have given the gift of divine communication, of prophecy, of all the gifts that God had given Moses, somebody else would have done a much better job. And he says that straight up, Shlach nabiyat tishlach. Send in the hands of the one that you're ultimately going to send. Mashiach is much better than me, the ultimate Mashiach. So send it with him. Why don't you just do one and done? Says Moses to God. Get the guy, pick out his soul, put him here, and make him the Messiah, make him the Moses. What do you need me for? Because Moses, not that he was self-deprecating, he just didn't feel worthy of God's extraordinary gift, or he didn't take credit for it. Now, this is a bit of a fine line in what I just said.
Credit where credit is due.
Self-effaced.
Oh, he gave it to God. Exactly.
credit.
He gave the credit to God. He didn't say, me. So in the analogy we said yesterday of the mountain, of the skyscraper, the guy throwing the rocks, he was the guy that was constantly looking up at the $100 bills. And he said, thank you, God. Why me? Why me?
Yeah, but today you called it an inferiority complex.
No, but see, there's a difference between an inferiority complex
Right.
and the lack of a God complex.
Ego.
Hubris, the lack of hubris. You have people walking around, strutting around like a peacock, feeling that they are God's gift to mankind.
Yeah, but there are also people who have a false, they make a big deal over the fact that they're always saying, no, it's really not me. When it's they are good.
I want to tell you, I think the biggest problem of our generation, the core problem of the core spiritual problem of our generation is that we don't believe enough in ourselves.
Oh.
That we don't
Enough in
believe
ourselves.
enough in ourselves. Let me give you a few examples. Moses.
Truly
So
believe in our
let me
true
move to
self.
Noah for a quick second. Let's talk about Noah. So Noah, it says, God spoke to him at the age of, he must have been 480 years old. At the tender age of 480 years old. God speaks to him. He was still a young man, he didn't have any kids yet. And God said to him, I'm going to destroy the world. So Noah's like, okay.
Okay.
So God says, I want you to build a boat. Okay. So he spends the next 120 years, he's building a boat. Like a real Florida contractor. It took him 120 years.
That's exactly right. Busy today.
This is the biblical root of the Florida contractor. All right. So it took him 120 years. Right. I blamed it on COVID. Okay. So maybe the Houthis are holding up the ship in the Red Sea. Okay. So
There was a pandemic. You didn't know it yet.
So there he is. He finally builds the boat. Now, it takes a lot of faith to build a boat. Hundreds of miles away from the sea. Right? It takes. Let's face it. I mean, seriously. If you started building a boat in Nebraska, a seafaring boat, that would raise some eyebrows. Like, what are you doing? That's what Moses in the middle of Turkey and Iran, the border. It's not even the coastline of Turkey. It's like he's on the inland border of Turkey, right? Hundreds of miles from the sea. He's building a boat. Okay. So people ask, he obviously believes in God if he's building a boat, right? Comes the day of the flood, and it says, Vayovay Noach el hateva. Vayisgor Hashem ba'adoi. And Noach comes to the ark, and Hashem closed it up for him. And the Talmud explains that what happened here what's going on was that Noah didn't enter the ark on his own accord. Why? Because Miktani Amana, he was lacking in faith. He was lacking in faith. That's what Rashi says.
He was really thinking of who's cleaning up all these animals.
Listen carefully, guys. This is beautiful stuff. He was lacking in faith.
How can he be lacking in faith and spend all these years building the ark?
This is my
That's
question.
exactly the point.
That's my question. That's what I'm asking. It says, Rashi says, Miktani Amana Haya, he didn't believe. He didn't believe, and that's why God had to force him into the ark, because he didn't believe. What didn't he believe? He didn't believe that there was going to be a flood.
Why do you build an ark?
Then why did he build an ark for the past 120 years? So, dude, you need a psychiatrist, right? He didn't believe the flood was going to come.
We talked about this.
What have you been doing for the past 120 years?
That's what we talked about.
So here's the thing.
Yeah, but-
Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was the mechutin of the Alter Rebbe. Their children married each other. He was the chassid of the Alter Rebbe, I guess, and the Baal Shem Tov. Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev has the most beautiful explanation. He says, the Rashi says that he was lacking in faith. Faith in God, he definitely had. Definitely had faith in God. You know what he was lacking faith in? He was lacking faith in himself. He did not believe that Noah had the ability to make a difference. Noah didn't believe that he had the capacity to avert the flood, to change the course of world history. He didn't think that his boat was going to make any speck and any iota of a difference. That's why he was like, what's the difference? Me? If I'm in the ark, if I'm out of the ark, who cares? Maybe I'll just die right here. Of course he believed there was going to be a flood. Of course he believed in God. He just didn't believe that he mattered to the course of humanity.
He'd be committing suicide if he didn't.
Okay, so what if I commit suicide?
There's somebody else.
Big whoop. Somebody else will step
Not a
in.
nice Jewish thing to do.
No, it wasn't Jewish.
He wasn't
Oh, was
Jewish.
Jewish.
But think about it. God says we're going to destroy the world. So what does he say? Okay. You want to build a boat? Okay. Oh, it took him 120 years. Why did it take him 120 years to build the boat? Because God wanted people to ask him so that he'd be able to inspire people to do teshuvah when they realized there's going to be a deluge. But Noah inspired no converts other than his own children, which is pretty good, I guess, in the bigger scheme of things. All of his 3 sons and daughters-in-law were with him, and his wife also. That's pretty impressive. But he had no converts. Nobody came on board. He couldn't even pull together a minyan after 120 years. I mean, this is pretty challenging. Why? Because Noah didn't believe in himself.
Self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy.
Lack of self-efficacy.
He didn't believe that he was worthy.
Like
He didn't believe that he had what it takes. He did not believe that he had what it takes. He didn't believe that he could make a difference if he would say to God, I don't think that's a good idea. If he could have protested, he didn't. And this, I believe, is the greatest challenge of our generation. When you meet a Jew and you say, I need you to lay tefillin because you're going to change the course of the war in Israel. Me? Seriously, Rabbi? Find someone else, right? You think my donation is going to make a difference to the Chabad? You think my showing up somewhere is going to make a difference? Nah, I'm just a nobody. This is the problem of our generation. If we walked around knowing that we are valuable, that we are chosen, that we are precious, our choices make a profound difference, not only to ourselves, but to the course of the future of our generation, to the course of world history, that that we're in some sort of stadium in the previous generations. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, they're all in the stands. King Solomon, King David, Bathsheba, Miriam, Moses, they're all in the stands. And they have passed the baton on from one generation to the next generation. If we realize that we're the ones holding the baton right now, and we're running to the finish line to bring Mashiach, and instead of running to the finish line with all these grandparents of ours in the stands cheering us on, we're like, I don't know if I believe in God.
Sit on the couch and watch
We
TV.
sit there, we're like, what about the Holocaust? Right? And they're like, doofus, can you run to the finish line? We'll talk about this later. Right? But we don't believe that we're on the field. We're not even sure that we're players on the field. We think we're just spectators. We're the spectator generation. You can flip on a television and you can literally watch an entire weekend away by binge watching an entire series on Netflix. You don't even have to move other than go to the bathroom, probably, right? But that's it. This is the generation that we live in. We're the spectator generation. And we don't realize that we are players on the field. This is what the Rabbi told us in his opening statement. When he became Rabbi, he said, guys, unkein fegalach in bosom. That's an interesting expression. No birds in the bosom, I guess. What does that mean? It means you can't rely on anybody else. Don't ask me how it means that, but that's what it means. No birds in the chest. In other words, don't rely on anybody else. Don't rely on the Rebbe. Don't rely on anybody else. You have to bring Mashiach. That's what the Rebbe told us. We're the 7th generation. The 7th is the one that brings the Shekhinah, the divine presence, down to this world. It lies on your shoulders. This was the teaching that the Rebbe told us. Your showing up to shul today or not showing up to shul will change the course of world history. You're laying tefillin, you're talking during davening, you're influencing a fellow Jew about Torah study over dinner last night is going to make the world of a difference. We can easily say, Rabbi, stop smoking, okay? You could say that. You could backhandedly dismiss what I'm saying. Or you can rise to the occasion and say, God put me exactly where I need to be. And I'm in this generation because I'm a finisher. I'm a closer.
Rabbi, keep smoking.
Exactly. You may say I'm a dreamer,
Keep smoking.
but I'm not the only
But
one.
I'm not the only one. That's a little bit like, gotta let it again.
That's the one.
Isn't,
I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. I want to finish with one more story. What?
See,
well, isn't a parallel to that also that we're players, not spectators, but also we're not victims?
Oh, yes. That's one
That's
step
a
worse.
whole part of
That's
this world today
victims,
that
by the way. If you
people
talk about
think
victims,
they're
that's
a
when you talk
victim.
about
deprecating.
self-deprecating.
Right.
Self-deprecating. Oh, I'm broken. Oh, I'm wounded.
No, you did it to me. It's not
Somebody
my
else
fault.
did it. Exactly. And you know why? I can't go to shul because I once had a rabbi and he was nasty to me. And that's why I can't have a relationship with God. Grow up, man. Come on. Look, I'm not endorsing any trauma. I'm not endorsing any abuse. God forbid. Please don't. But if it happened to you, if something happened to you, if somebody didn't look at you nicely, if some Rebbitzin was mean to you once upon a time when you were 14 years old, okay. Stop blaming other people.
Get past this.
That would be self-deprecating. That would be damaging. Moses recognizes, he knows who Moses is. Like, Moses is the man. Totally gets it. He's communicated with God. Awesome. But if this guy would have been given them the gifts of Moses, he would have made this Moses look like
But it's not even-
yesterday's laundry. What?
It's not even so much whether we think we're victims, we're told we're victims. If you think about our
Well,
society.
Stop listening. Who are you listening to?
Yeah,
Remember what I said to you before
We
about the
tell
5
you
people?
you're a victim.
Remember I told you the 5 people you hang around with?
Don't expect much.
Get a new therapist, my friend. Talk to the different people. Maybe you need to switch out your friends list. If the people you're hanging out with are negative, are toxic, are poisonous, then
They're not.
switch them
They're
out.
not.
And you know what a chassid is? A chassid machta sviva. Chuck, you're a chassid, right?
Yes, so.
Yeah, of course you're a chassid. You're a scholar, a student of Tanya. So a chassid machta sviva. The chassid makes his environment. He's not the product of it. A chassid, this is why we drink vodka, by the way. This is the reason. You know, somebody came in here, wanted to join the congregation from Mirasol, and he looks at me, he's on the beam, he's linked film with me, he's like, Rabbi, every rabbi that I know has a food problem. You don't look like you have a food problem. Like you don't eat too much. I said, no, but
I drink.
I might drink. What is it with vodka? What do we have with vodka? So the thing is, vodka is a very interesting substance. You put it in the freezer. It's not intimidated by its surroundings. On the contrary, you take a freezing cold vodka and you drink it, what happens? Warms you up. How's that? Unintimidated by its surroundings. You could put a chassid in the South Pole, and what happens? He's building a Chabad house, right? You know, it's that joke about what's the women's appeal, the Hadassah group. There was a Hadassah group that went to hell. No, they were trying to go to heaven. They died in a bus, you know. So they go up to heaven. Heaven was full, so they put them into purgatory, you know, the waiting room. They didn't have time to process them. The Gehenna. So while they were down there in purgatory, while they were waiting, the joke goes, you know, that urgent call comes from purgatory to the front desk. Can you get these Hadassah ladies out of here, please? They've already running an appeal and they're installing air conditioning in the whole purgatory. So so back to I want to finish with one closing story. Stephen Clark, nice to meet you. Okay. So quick story over here. So in 1967, Very, very apropos to what's going on right now. Days before the breakout of the 6-Day War, the Rebbe got up on 770 Eastern Parkway outdoors to a massive children's gathering in honor of Lag BaOmer. And the Rebbe declared as follows. He said, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. I mean, the war drums were beating, Nasser was signing treaties with all the Arab nations around Israel, vowing to drive Israel into the sea, right? Today it's from the river to the sea. Then they were driving Israel into the sea, if you remember, 67. So it was very, very scary times. But a Jew is never afraid, remember, right? Never afraid. Fear is not a Jewish trait. It's idolatrous. So the Rebbe came out and he declared that the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And then he quoted a verse from Deuteronomy, 5th book of Moses, which says, and the nations of the land will see the name of God upon you, and they will fear you. This is a reference to the mitzvah of tefillin, as the Gemara says in Tractate Menachos, which means when a Jew lays tefillin, the nations of the land will fear the Jewish people. The Rebbe pretty much said that if we go out on a global campaign to lay tefillin with as many Jewish men as possible over the age of 13, regardless of their faith or lack thereof, we will experience a miracle of epic and biblical proportions. And that's what happened. They started laying tefillin with Jews like it was going out of fashion. And of course, we know the miracle of the 6-Day War. Now, during that time, the Chabad Chassidim established a tefillin stand at the Western Wall. At the Western Wall, which many of you have experienced.
I've experienced it.
Yeah, on the side. They have like 85 pairs of tefillin. And
Is that the Chabad?
yeah. Rabbi Shalom White. So whenever one of my people goes there, he takes a selfie and he sends it straight to me. I've got eyes. I got eyes on you in Israel. All right. So what happens is that he lays the tefillin, they're laying tefillin over there at the Western Wall, and there's Jews that are coming out of the kibbutzim, Jews that don't know how to say Shema Yisrael, that don't know the difference in Yom Kippur and a Hamantash, and they've got no Jewish education, nothing. They're coming from communist kibbutzim in 1967. They've learned zero Judaism, faith, and they're laying tefillin first time in their lives because life depends on it. Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg, who was a famous Orthodox rabbi, a great codifier in Jerusalem. It's not Chabad at all, but he was a great rabbi. Not a Chassid. No, he's an Orthodox rabbi, but he's a great, great rabbi. He marvels, he's like crying as he's watching what's going on. And they said to him, what, you never seen Jews laying tefillin? Like, what are you crying? So he says, there's no novelty in this that the Jews believe in God. But it takes a Rebbe to believe in the Jews. To be able to find a Jew who's a farmer, a cucumber farmer in the south of Israel in the Negev, right? And to say that you need to lay tefillin because you're important, you matter, and your choice today to lay tefillin will change the course of this war. That is what it takes a Rebbe to do. Any Jew can believe in God, but it takes a Rebbe to believe in the Jews. And I would say that the spiritual challenge of our generation, the greatest spiritual challenge, is that we think too humbly of ourselves. Somebody else will do it.
How can I count?
I don't matter. Doesn't really matter, right? And when we realize that we do matter, we are critical, vital to the future of our generation of Jewish history. We are the closers. We're going to take that baton passed on by your mother and your grandmother and your great-grandmother, all the way back to Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, back to Adam and Eve, right? You're holding the baton now, and it's up to you to take it over the finish line. If we only realized how important we are, we'd bring Mashiach.
An example right here. It took place in last week and this week, so forth. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it's usually Toby and Jonathan, the Vigler service. Jonathan's out of town for a few days, and who stepped up to the plate? Andy.
Sure.
Shkoyach. With his beautiful Hungarian accent. I love it. Beautiful. No, it's beautiful. It's very it's very traditional. It reminds me of my grandparents used to speak like that. And it's folks, I better run. We're nowhere near the end of the discourse, even though we're in the third last paragraph.
I knew that.
But we're covering ground slowly, one word at a time.
That's okay.
All right, folks. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing.
Dr. Co-op.